This is Governor Larry Hogan, and I don't always have time to listen to podcasts, but I do enjoy listening to the Maryland Crabs podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs. It sounds like we're underwater, too.
Why?
We've got that monsoon outside.
Yeah. Man, it was raining like crazy on Tuesday. Tuesday?
Yeah,
Monday.
Well, today's Tuesday, and it's raining like hell, too.
Yeah.
I redid...
Good for the Republicans.
Yeah, that's what they said. But then there's all this data online I'm looking on Facebook of people saying that, no, it's actually good for the Democrats. But yeah, rain generally is good for the Republicans.
Well, we will see.
Democrats tend to be kind of made of sugar. They don't like rain.
That's true.
Or if it's chilly.
That is true.
Or if it's a smog out. Or a breeze.
Mm-hmm. Hey, this week we've got a good issue. Issue? We don't have issues, do we?
I have tons of issues. Yeah, I do.
We don't record issues.
New meds and everything. Yeah.
Opened up that can of worms.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we've got a really good episode this week. And Gavin Buckley, our mayor, has been mired in this whole city dock revitalization thing. And I know when he came out with the big old hotel and everything else like that, Historic Annapolis came out and was like, whoa, wait a minute. So we wanted to talk to Robert Clark, who is the CEO of Historic Annapolis Foundation, and find out what their take was. And actually, I learned a whole lot more about the organization, how many buildings they have, they manage, they own.
Yeah, I didn't know that stuff, to be honest with you. I just thought that there were these cranky people with clipboards who went around frowning at people painting their houses different colors.
Well, they're that too.
Yeah. No, I did. I learned a lot.
Actually, that's the Historic Preservation Commission.
I put them all in one pot because I'm lazy.
That is true. But it was really very interesting. And the Bryce House is a beautiful thing. Go see it if it is under construction. They do have the hard hat tours, so definitely go check that out. And just some of the history that the city has. It's pretty fascinating that we talked about and showed me around a little bit. And it was a lot of fun. So I'll tell you, why don't we pay some bills real quick, and then we can get right into it with Robert Clark, who is the CEO of Historic Annapolis.
Buying a home is a big accomplishment, and we enjoy being part of that, especially for first-timers. The excitement of being approved and knowing they were building their future in their new home. All over the county, you will find homeowners who received the funds they needed from us. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of Severn Bank, and I tell you nothing means more to our bank or me than helping home buyers. Last week, I drove by a house and saw kids playing in the front yard. I recall how excited their parents were when they found out that the home was going to be theirs. So if it's a home, an addition, or a renovation, see us at Severn. You'll find affordable home loans, great service, a commitment to our community, and an enthusiastic team to help you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. All loans subject to credit approval. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
When you think of Watermark, you probably think of Harbor Queen. You know, the big white boat that sits down at the end of City Dock. But did you know that Harbor Queen is much more than just a visitor attraction? That thousands of local school children take field trips aboard it every year to learn about the Chesapeake Bay and our region's history. But that's not all you don't know about Watermark. When the Susquehanna River crested, washing thousands of tons of debris into our waterways, Watermark was there, rolling up their sleeves, helping the Annapolis Harbor Master clean up Ego Alley. And when the Annapolis Police Department SWAT team needed a boat to conduct special training exercises on to help protect our waters, they called Watermark. Watermark, making our mark. To learn more about how Watermark is here for our hometown, visit watermarkjourney.com.
We're here at the James Bryce House in downtown Annapolis with Robert Clark, who is the CEO of Historic Annapolis. How are you today?
I'm splendid. Thank you, John.
And this Historic Annapolis Foundation is the full...
We dropped the name Foundation several years ago, so our official corporate name now is Historic Annapolis, Inc. Foundation suggests we have money to give. We actually seek money.
And, you are not you personally, but Historic Annapolis is really a stalwart in Annapolis. And you're sort of the overseer of keeping our town historic and what it really is. And is that primarily the goal of the organization, just to preserve what was?
That would be at the core of our mission for sure. For 65 years, we've been advocates for preservation and stewards for preservation. We are not the enforcement arm of the city. That's the Historic Preservation Commission.
Right.
But we partner with them on lots of issues. We try to be a supporter of theirs when appropriate, and we're a resource to them. We obviously have lots of archives, information on all these historic structures in the city. So we work hand in glove with them, but we're a nonprofit.
So you're just sort of like the adopted stepsister, I guess, of the enforcement thing. But I mean, you've got the resources. You've got
we have the good fortune to, when I say we're stewards of preservation, we have 13 18th century buildings that we're responsible for, 11 of which are owned by the state of Maryland, and they've leased those buildings to us, James Bryce House, William Paca House and Garden, to be the leading voice in the city on preservation issues.
Sure, absolutely. You mentioned the Paca House, and I get into the argument all the time with friends because I say the Paca House, and they say, oh, no, it's Paca. So now we're coming to the horse's mouth here. What is it, Paca or Paca?
I actually know. It's more Paca in Baltimore and more Paca in Annapolis, but the proof we have is William Paca was a member of the Tuesday Club, an all-men's, drinking and politicking club here in town, and they had a newsletter that they all contributed to, and in one of those newsletters we found a poem with rhymes. So okay. I forget what rhymed with Paca, but that's how we just, acre, Paca.
Okay. And Paco just wouldn't fit.
It wouldn't fit.
There you go. It is official. It is the William Paca House. And I will say the favorite event that I have in Annapolis every year is at about noon on the 4th of July at the William Paca House.
Thank you. That's ours too.
Very, very small event as far as events go. I don't want to admit that I tear up and cry every time, but I do.
Of course you do.
And this is the naturalization ceremony that is every 4th of July. They bring in anywhere from 30, I've seen over 100 new citizens that have gone the route of some of them, I guess they renounce their birth country and accept America as their country. They take the oath of citizenship, usually administered by somebody with the Department of Naturalization. Or sometimes I know we've had some cabinet secretaries come down at different times. The Annapolis Children's Chorus performs. The house is open. The gardens are open. Last year, I don't remember her name, but there was a woman from an African country who had her little daughter with her that absolutely stole the show that she wanted to bring up. And it's just, if anybody that's listening has never seen this is something you need to get up early on the 4th of July, not really early.
It's 10 a.m. And it's only 1 hour.
And it's usually very warm, but it's very worth it to do it. And it's just out in the right on the patio before the gardens of the Paca House. And it's just, it's a really, really, really moving event that the city does. And
it's here.
Thing. It is.
You don't have to go to Washington or some other place. It's right here in the Paca Gardens.
And I mean, obviously the significance of that is that Paca was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and the history of, we do have 4 signers of the Declaration of Independence here. And hopefully you're not going to ask me exactly which ones they are, because I would probably have to struggle with that. And I don't know that I'm that fast on my phone with Google, but let's talk about, you said you manage 11 buildings.
13.
Or manage 13, you own 2. And they're owned by the state, and they've given you long-term leases, and they said you guys are kind of trustworthy, and we think you can do a good job. There are worse landlords, I think, for 18th century buildings than you guys that are out there. And you guys made the news this summer, and I wouldn't say you, but it was the National Trust for Historic Preservation listed the City Dock area specifically as one of the potentially endangered sites, the 11 most endangered sites in the country, which is, we see tons of lists with the greatest restaurants in town and everything else. This is a list that we did not want to get on. And it was an answer to the mayor's proposal to build what I like to call a Caribbean all-inclusive resort at City Dock, but it looked like a sandals resort, some of the pictures I had seen, but a hotel down on City Dock, which would dynamically just change the City Dock as we know it. And there was a press conference out in the garden, I guess, between the two buildings down there. And there were some very salient points that were made. I mean, the mayor did come up somewhat, I don't want to say uninvited, but it was not on the printed agenda, but he was able to address and explain sort of his role around that. But what was the main objection on that? Was it the height? Was it the scope?
So it's a complicated question. To do what the developer in this particular case had in mind, it would require substantial changes to existing ordinances that deal with height and bulk of buildings. The main ordinance that covers this was put in place after what was formerly the Marriott Hotel was built. And if you go there today, and particularly if you look at the former Marriott Hotel from the Eastport side, its height and bulk is way out of scale for what was designed to be a human scale sort of a city.
Okay.
Way back when. Historic Annapolis is way on board for thoughtful, smart development. And we'd be the first ones to confess that lots of the buildings, including the building in question, could easily be replaced and nobody would miss it. But to replace an ugly former restaurant building with a building that can confine to existing height and bulk ordinances that have been in place for over 4 decades, we found objectionable.
Well, this is what thwarted the Ordan proposal for 110 Compromise Street at one point, where they said they needed 2.5 stories or 3 stories, whatever it was, and it ended up being something like 3 feet difference or something like that. They just couldn't figure it out, and that ended that. So is there much difference on the other side of Eagle Alley on that? Or is that just that makes... I mean, don't remember Historic Annapolis getting involved in that, or maybe it just wasn't time to get involved.
Well, we did. We met with the developer. We met with the mayor a few times. We had them meet with our board, and to your point, they couldn't quite make the economics work within the size envelope that the ordinance required.
Okay.
The new developers, it turned out, did.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand a little bit about development in the sense that the bigger you build it, the economics make more sense.
Sure.
I get that. But at the same time, our belief here is that the human scale that we've all enjoyed and brings so many heritage and other type visitors to our city needs to be protected.
On City Dock, you don't have a problem with a hotel down on City Dock, do you?
Absolutely not.
T-shirt shops? Now we're talking. But a hotel does make some sense down there. We've obviously seen several businesses fail down in that section of City Dock. I mean, we go from Harbor House, which is when I came to town. It was there. Harbor House, I think so.
Yep.
And then it was at Phillips, and then there was for a hot minute there was a British pub, and then it's been
sold 6 times.
The Harbor Grill and everything else. So restaurants don't seem to fare very well there.
The way they're configured, and that's why this whole conversation was interesting because. And I applaud the mayor for getting everybody engaged in the conversation, because you have a number of issues that all sort of come together here. You've got 150 cars parked with the best view of the Annapolis Harbor. Nobody thinks that's a good idea, to include us. You have 2 larger-than-life rising sea level pumps that need to be installed someplace. You have a harbor master's building that could not be placed at a worst possible spot. And so what the mayor and the developer and the architect attempted to do, or attempted to accomplish here, was to solve a number of those things all at the same time. If you could get the harbor master office and the 2 pumping stations sort of all part of a hotel project, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you clean the whole thing up, you get rid of 150 cars, you put it into a family inviting recreational space. Who thinks that's a bad idea?
You've totally reinvented City Dock.
Right.
That's great.
So I like all that, but it has to be legal. I mean, it has to be within the guidelines of existing ordinances.
Okay, fair enough. It's funny you said that you applaud the mayor for bringing everybody together on this, and I want to get to that because there is something going on. But that's what he's, I want to say, campaigning on now with the bike lane. He says, yeah, by putting the bike lane, which has been torn out at this point, he says, no other mayor has been able to bring the business community together as one cohesive. Granted, it was to hate the mayor, but that was he'll take it where he can get it. But coming from your objection, coming from the inclusion of the 11 most endangered cities, and Preservation Maryland also included that in the 6 locations within Maryland to fix. You guys have partnered now together with the Urban Land Institute, which is out of Baltimore?
It's national.
Is it national?
The chapter that we're doing business with for this upcoming get-together is the Baltimore chapter. The city retained ULI in 2010 to do a similar study, and it was out of the Washington chapter. In terms of the way they operate their business, we geographically fall into the Baltimore chapter. But it's a national organization. And
this is I don't want to say a partnership, but I mean, I know you're funding part of it, but I mean, you've got Historic Annapolis, you've got the City of Annapolis, you've got the Urban Land Institute, you've got the National Trust for Historic Preservation, you've got Preservation Maryland, all coming together now to have this conversation of what a re-envisioned City Dock looks like. And is the city on board with accepting or working with what comes out of this?
I can tell you what I know.
Or we find out.
I can't speak for the city, obviously, and I won't. But we've been spending a lot of time with the leadership of the city, hopefully to ensure that we're all at lockstep here, and we want to get to a good conclusion. The way the process works with the ULI is that they want us to ask the questions we seek answers for. So step 1 was, what are the questions? So we did that in partnership with the city. So we sat down with planning and zoning officials in the mayor's office, and we came up with 10 or 12 questions that we would like the professionals at ULI to answer. So what they do is pull from their ranks experts in the disciplines that the chair and the administrative people feel would be most appropriate. As an example, this is the issue about development. On our city doc suggests that you ought to have developers on the ULL panel, and they have 3.
Okay.
We need architects, which they have. We need landscape architects, which we have. We have rising sea level experts, which are going to be part of this.
Transportation or parking peoples.
Traffic, parking, all that. And it is this is not going to be a necessarily a map that you turn over to somebody to go build it, but it's designed to collect opinions and then merge that with experts that can sort of filter the wild ideas down to things that are more realistic. And we met actually yesterday with city officials, and I'm very excited. They seem to be very much committed to use this as a next step in the process. I believe the mayor when he says that he wants action here, and I think that he and they understand that the city doesn't have the resources that the ULI does, so that you get the benefit of great opinions from smart people that aren't on the city's payroll. And hopefully that'll be thought-provoking so we can talk about next steps after that. And hopefully this ULI panel is the first inning.
Okay.
And then there'll be the second inning, and then there'll be the third inning. And if we continue to talk and engage in conversation, then hopefully we can come up with a multiple-step process that ends us up with a very good product.
Where does this differ from like the City Dock master plan that the city worked on for decades and decades? I mean, the city is notorious for doing plans and then putting them on shelves.
That's why I'm optimistic about our current mayor. He doesn't strike me as a put-on-the-shelf kind of guy. So when we had these conversations originally, it was important to me, before we went out and solicited the money, that he was on board to take this study seriously and to be engaged and involved in it, and also his colleagues with the city. I feel comfortable, and as I say, we met as recently as yesterday, I feel comfortable that they're on board. They would like to do an informed decision process that makes sense. I can't guarantee they will.
Right.
But they say they want to, and because of the mayor's great interest in being successful, I don't know that he has said this, but clearly if the city dock development plan is successful, he'll be successful. And that's what we all seek.
Without a doubt. And I think everybody is working to the same conclusions. Let's get rid of the cars. Let's get rid of and make it a family thing there as well. Let's talk a little bit about Historic Annapolis. You said that you solicited the money for this fund. You guys are supported by donations and programs, right?
We are.
And grants and whatnot. So let's talk about some of the programs that Historic Annapolis has, and I guess how you're structured. I mean, I'm assuming there's a board.
We do have a board of trustees. It's 21 local community leaders.
How's that to wrangle? 21. sometimes when the bigger the committee.
Well, we actually think this is the right size for us. We have thoughtfully invited over my 6 years here people to join us that have expertise in fields that are important to Historic Annapolis. So we've got 3 architects, we have 2 developers, and so on. We've got a couple of people that are really smart in museum studies, and we have the former curator of the Naval Academy. So we try to get people that can leverage our staff here to the greater good, and that's worked out very successfully.
How many staff do you have?
Full and part-time total is about 50.
Oh, wow. Okay. You said of the 13 buildings that you have now, are you responsible for all the maintenance on that?
We are. And you asked earlier about how's the money part work. We have an operating budget of about $3 million. About a third of that comes from the state. It's their buildings.
Sure.
And the other 2/3 we raise through events, tours. We have a museum store. This is a good contributor. We have an annual plant sale. We have the Pick a Girlfriends event. We've got the
Blazers and Bourbon.
We've got our 20th or 25th candlelight tour of historic homes coming up here first weekend in November. We'll have 2,500 people strolling the streets of Annapolis. This will be our 27th year. So all that contributes. And then we invest those monies back into our business as well as the state buildings.
And I will say that the museum store at the foot of Main Street, it's probably, 99 or 100? 99 Main Street is a wonderful store for
Thank you.
If you've got any Christmas or holiday gifts that you need to get, there's always something there. During the Midnight Madnesses, they always seem to have one of the really good apple champagne punches there.
Well, thank you.
Up on the 3rd floor, you've got a little a museum there as well.
We do, and parts of the 2nd and all of the 3rd floor. We have an exhibit that's been there since 2013 called Freedom Bound. It's a story of 9 runaway slaves and what happened to them after they ran away. And so you go up there and you can visually and audibly hear what happened to those 9 slaves. That's been there since 2013. And we'll travel here at some point. We're in the design phase of a new exhibit, which we'll install down the road.
And then you'd mentioned the candlelight tour of the homes.
Yes.
And that's, again, coming up in November. And that's just a beautiful time where you've got – and you go to different neighborhoods, don't you?
We do.
And I know last year my girlfriend went with a whole bunch of her friends, and they just said it was just the most amazing. That was in Murray Hill last year?
Yes, it was, exactly. It's that's very common, by the way. People travel in packs, and they make it a social night. We're fortunate to have lots of local restaurants agree to give a discount if you're wearing your HA
button or the badge.
Yep, you get an automatic discount. But it's a very social evening, and we have the homes within walking distance of each other, so you don't have to get in your car. You can park. And this year we're doing something a little bit different in that we're going to start with a reception at the Market House. So you can go there, get a glass of wine, a little tidbit to eat, and then begin your tour from there, or you end up there. I mean, whatever you choose.
Right.
We just thought the newly reopened Market House was a good place to do that.
I'll wait to see, but I think that's pretty close to a home run.
I think so. We're very excited.
I mean, we got to see how February plays out for them and whatnot. But I mean, I think it's just I've talked to Jody, who manages it, and he's constantly looking, saying, okay, well, these noodles didn't sell, so we've got to change up the noodles, and just little tiny things to make it appealing to not only the visitors that we had. I know they had tremendous weeks during the boat show, but the locals. And that's
I eat lunch there at least twice a week.
Yeah,
and so do most of the 50 people who work here.
Well, the other one is when they do the grand illumination of the Christmas tree. That'll be a telltale, because every year after year after year I cringe, because all of the stores on Main Street seem to close down except for the restaurants and the bars. And I'm like, you've got 2,000 people here. I'll call Mills out. I mean, Mills, why aren't you open? Who's not going to want to buy a bottle of wine? And even the T-shirt shops. I mean, who's not going to go get some Christmas T-shirt or something like that? I agree. I think that's the merchants down there need to really rethink how they do business. But Christmas time is just wonderful. The holiday times that are down here,
particularly in downtown.
Yeah,
Annapolis.
And you have opened up your buildings to watermark tours on occasion for some of their walking tours.
Yes.
They are a very good steward of the history and
excellent
stewards of the building. And I was on one of their haunted tours when they went into I believe it was the Bryce House before the construction started, maybe 4 years ago.
Yep.
And a lot of times you sit there and you say, okay, they're just spinning this tale of ghosts and everything else. And I will say that I didn't have anything touch me or anything, but it was a very weird thing happen in this house. I was taking some pictures going up the staircase, and the phone would not transmit them out for whatever reason. It was very strange. I said, okay, well, it's just the brick and everything else is fine. So I got back out and I tried to transmit it, and it would not do it. The front of the house, that would go fine onto Facebook, because I was sort of Facebook living it as I was going through the All Annapolis page, and it wouldn't go. It was the weirdest thing in the world. So I said, okay, well, it's just something weird. I go back home, and I just tried to upload the pictures off of the phone, and it errored on every single picture of only the ones that were taken inside the house. And I ended up having to rename those 4 pictures, the file name, and it went. And it was just the strangest thing in the world. I don't know that it was a ghostly thing or anything like that, but it was just a really weird experience at the Bryce House.
I would encourage you to go on our website, annapolis.org, and it's a rich website we spend a lot of time on. But if you go into the James Bryce House section, you'll see a lot about what we're doing with the restoration and so on. But we have 2 live webcams in there 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So if you're wacky like I suspect you are, you'll set your alarm for 3 a.m. and get up and see these ghosts to see if you can see them being recorded, because the cams are live, and you'll see during the day, you'll see workers and construction going on. You'll see archaeologists digging and so on. But if you have the courage, tune in at 4 a.m. to see if you see some ghosts.
I may do that. I may do that. What is the construction on the Bryce House? This has been under construction for about a year and so right now, and I'm going to say construction, but under renovation.
So it's a straightforward question with a semi-fuzzy answer. The state of Maryland purchased this building in December of 2014, and shortly after that, we made the decision that we wanted to restore the building.
And this was the Masons Union owned it, right?
International Masons Institute, that's correct. And we discovered fairly quickly that the house is significantly more important than we knew, significantly more important than we thought, for a couple of reasons. One, it is almost entirely original. Most of these kind of jumbo houses, to include Monticello or Mount Vernon or Montpelier, all have survived or not survived terrible fires. And pretty common in that era to have chimney fires and have the house burned down. This one escaped all that. The other thing that happened, which was great for the house, was everybody who's owned it has loved it. So there's not been much destructive tinkering. Preservation techniques today, obviously, are far more advanced than they've ever been, so that's a good thing in terms of taking a house that's never been fussed with and restoring it at this point. The other amazing thing about this house is Mr. Bryce himself kept a extraordinarily detailed day-to-day diary of the building of the house that runs 150 typewritten pages. So every nail, every brick, every slave, every piece of paint, and so on, he recorded. So as we restore the house under the leadership of the Maryland Historic Trust and Colonial Williamsburg, we know just how Bryce built it and what he used, what kind of nails, what kind of paint, what kind of plaster.
So you've got the blueprint.
We have the blueprint.
Now, is that a document that you own?
It's a document that's at the Maryland State Archives.
State Archives over there on Rao Boulevard.
I'll give you a facsimile on your way out today so that you can go home and try to read it. But it's fascinating on so many levels. I'll just give you one. The archaeologists dig inside and outside. And one of them got a hold of this diary one day and wanted to see how much stone Bryce bought for the foundation. So they found the entry there, how many tons of stone. And then they counted up the stone that was in the basement, and they discovered that Bryce had purchased right at twice the amount of stone that was needed for the foundation. So they got curious about that, and the more they were digging outside, the more they started to find remnants of a stone garden wall. It turns out it goes all the way down here, down towards the Naval Academy, and there's pieces of it. Every once in a while will be above ground, a lot of it's below ground. We found part of the wall in the basement of the house next door. So the combination of the state of preservation the house enjoys, the technology of restoration has never been as fabulous as it is today. So a lot of the things that have been done here over the years were modern then but aren't now. So we can do that. For instance, a lot of the HVAC we will take outside so that you can see the house the way the Bryce family saw it. And we're advantaged in that it is owned by the state. They are very big believers in making sure that this becomes something valuable to all of us that pay taxes in the state. And they're anxious to have it finished so that it can be open to the public. We're going to make everybody proud with this restoration. We have lots of experts.
What's your time frame? When's it going to be done? You can't rush history. You're going to tell me.
I wish I'd have thought of that. I think we have a time frame of 3 to 5 years. You mentioned we've been at this for a while, about 18 months. The 18 months that we've been engaged so far is largely investigation. I don't mean walking around with a memo pad, but I mean these are people that are doing forensic, want to find out are these the original doors and windows, or where was the original...
Well, sure, there's history that has yet to be discovered in this building.
There's a lot of history yet to be discovered, and this is a house, now remember, you've got slaves living in the attic, and so we've already found lots of artifacts from that. You go down to the basement, we found Mr. Bryce's wine cellar. We found a doorway that had been created long after the Bryce family had departed, when the house was apparently owned by Carville Hall. They wanted another doorway into another room for what reasons known only to them. But when they poked a doorway into the stone wall, they just threw the stones over the corner, and nobody that's owned the house since then, 1908, has elected to get rid of the stones. So when the restoration people arrived, they said, well, we got to put we got to put the wall back. So as they get the masons, in fact, there's a trowel that we used to put a new... our renewal stone, I guess, in. When the masons are putting these stones back in the walls, back in this doorway to create the wall, they come across a fragment of a tombstone underneath all this rock. And the tombstone said, July 18, 1765, died, and somebody Bryce. So Willie Graham, who's the gentleman up from Colonial Williamsburg, promptly calls Glenn Campbell, our senior historian, and said, who died in Annapolis, July 18, 1765, and Glenn, within 15 minutes, it was Anne Bryce, sister of Judge John Bryce. And you're going, well, how is it that the fraction of the tombstone is here? Well, apparently, as Church Circle, I mean, everybody who died in Annapolis
was buried in Church Circle.
Were buried in Church Circle, because you're members of St. Anne's. Mm-hmm. But at some point, Church Circle gets smaller, right? As
cars,
cars, Budweiser trucks. They moved lots of the graves out to West Street, St. Anne's Cemetery there. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not so fast. Maybe they moved tombstones, because there's lots of graves. You see in the paper, they'll turn up one every once in a while when they're repairing a sidewalk. So the Bryce family apparently secured some of these tombstones to make steps. So they have granite steps within the house, and this was one of these strays that was left over back in the early 1900s when they were throwing all these stones over.
And it just happened to be a relative. Wow.
But I got 1,000 of those stories. You don't have enough time for the stuff they're finding.
And this is just something that you discovered during the renovation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this will be ultimately opened up to the public as a museum to tour,
as it is today. Saturday we've got a hard hat tour. We do one a month.
Right, I saw the hard hats when I walked in, all stacked up.
Yeah, feel free to come on over here and tell your friends. We do one hard hat tour, or if a group wants to come some other time, we'll
do it anytime.
Do it anytime, yeah.
And the Pega House is also open to the public.
It is
as well. What other buildings are open to the public?
So we have a early 19th century modest home on Pinckney, which we call Shiplap. So it is.
And that's the one that's a couple doors up from McGarvey's, right?
No, that's I'm sorry, did I say hogshead or shiplap? It's hogshead is the one we interpret as open to the public.
Okay.
Shiplap is the one that's a couple doors up front.
Okay. And the first house that's open to the public, is that the one on Prince George Street?
No, hogshead is on Pinckney Street.
Okay.
As well.
And it's a modest house of a...
It's a modest house, 2 rooms down, 2 rooms up, no plumbing. Presumably it was lived in by an average family in late 18th century, early 19th century.
Okay. You say no plumbing. So did that house sit abandoned or unused for decades?
Presumably. I mean, I've seen pictures of it. It looked like it was in tear down, fall down condition, just like shiplap was.
And then Historic Annapolis or other entities would come in to do the preservation and restore it?
Yes.
It just seems strange to me that somebody would just allow a house, not try to sell it or abandon, and improve it throughout the year, even if it's not to original historic.
So you and I are looking at these properties with our 2018 eyes. I'm told in most cities like Annapolis, Fleet Street and the Cornhill Street and the Pinckney Street, this was housing, no plumbing in any of them. These are housing of the people who worked in these big homes, more modest homes, the more modest income earners. And as soon as they could, most of the cities, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, Boston, as soon as you could, you ripped that stuff out. You just bulldozed it out and you built the fancy stuff. Well, Annapolis, because of the way we evolved, we never could tear them down. There's always people living in them. And as a result, they survived, and as a result, they've been fixed up. And as a result, they all have indoor plumbing, and they're now highly prized homes that sell for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's how it happened.
Interesting. Including the homes that you own or you manage and not manage, what's the most significant piece of property in Annapolis to an historian to Historic Annapolis?
So that's a hard one to answer. My answer would be the William Pecka House and Garden, because Historic Annapolis earned its spurs by literally stepping in front of the bulldozer. And you can't see it. This is this was the Carvel Hall back of the hotel that was glommed onto the back.
And that's where the gardens are now,
That's
right?
Correct.
And that hotel burnt down?
No, it was torn down.
Torn down.
So it was, the hotel went out of business. And Historic Annapolis persuaded the state of Maryland to buy the Carvel Hotel and tear it down. And they did, because they wanted to restore the garden.
Now, was the garden originally there at the Pecka House?
Yeah,
and then the hotel was built?
That's right, on top of it. But the William Pecka House was slated for demolition itself. And apparently a 1960s concrete architecture office building was scheduled to be built on its site. And here we are many years later thinking, what? In other words, if it's okay to tear down the home of a signer, what else would have been okay to tear down? Well, it would have been okay to tear down anything. Charles Carroll, Chase Lloyd, Hammond Harwood. So Historic Annapolis and our leaders at that time said no. And St. Clair Wright and others got the money to purchase it, and then they sold it to the state of Maryland, and in the partnership they raised the money to restore the William Pecka House and Garden. So my own story is the most significant property in our portfolio is that, because of what it means to Annapolis and what it means to our lifestyle.
Well, that's your figurehead property. I mean, that's the signature property for the organization for sure. What types of events are held at these? I mean, I know you've got different programming. We've talked about the different programs that you do. Are these buildings available for weddings and for private events? Or, I mean, obviously you're not running to the fraternity at University of Maryland to have their rager.
So the answer is yes. Some are available to rent. We have, of the 11 properties, forgetting Pecka and Bryce and such, but we've got buildings on Main Street, 77 Main. We've got 206 Main. We have,
what's 206?
That is currently the Alpaca Ladies Wool and Clothes Store. So what we do with those buildings is we sublease them. So we sublease to Capital T's, we sublease to Alpaca, we sublease to McGarvey's.
Right.
And so we get earned income to invest back into the buildings. The buildings that are open for events would largely be the Pecka House and Garden. Pecka House is limited for events because it's got a priceless decorative arts collection. But the Pecka Garden will do 3 or 4 dozen events, do a lot of weddings, a lot of rehearsal dinners,
right,
and such. The Bryce House, when completed, will be an enormously attractive venue for events, corporate events, weddings. We got our first indoor venue.
I was at an event here. Ellen Moyer was mayor, and I believe the Masons owned it at the time. And it was, somebody invited me to come, and it was a women in politics kind of a meeting. And it was funny. I felt so out of place as being like one of the only guys in the room. So we're just sort of sitting in the back corner there. And Ellen, I remember she said something or other, and was talking about how powerful women were. I think Barbara Mikulski was here and everything else. And forever people have been running politics like them. And they point to like the two guys in the room. It was the most awkward moment. It was like, okay, but it was. I remember we were in the room off to as you came in the main entrance, just off to the right. But so the Bryce House will be open for
absolutely
events as well as the Pake
sure.
House. Give me a quirky thing that most people don't know about history in Annapolis. Or I know I'd heard a story about you could tell somebody's wealth by how the bricks, and I'm going to draw a blank on the name, but how the bricks are laid, whether they're laid long or short.
I think that is what we in modern days would call showing off. Yes, the Bryce House is a good example of that. Because if you see the bricks are laid end to end, so all you're looking at is ends, it takes twice as many bricks to build the house, which means you're just showing off. I have enough money to do this, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But something else quirky, I think we have, I'll answer your question differently. Lots of people don't know that the state of Maryland owns the Oyster Bar at McGarvey's. So we've taken a building there that was, I've seen the early pictures of it. You and I could have put a shoulder to the thing. It couldn't have been torn down on the spot. And somehow the state came into ownership, and somehow it came into us to worry about, and partnered with Mike Ashford of McGarvey's, and that's turned into a very successful historic property. And that was, obviously, that was part of the colonial days commerce and maritime trade there.
Sure.
And right next door to that is another building we own, which was a waterfront warehouse where goods would be stored, waiting for the ships to come in to put on the ship. So it's not quirky, but it's something you don't think about as you walk by because it's become part. We've repurposed these buildings that were and should have been torn down but weren't, and they were saved by smart people at Historic Annapolis in our past.
Are there other buildings that you're coveting? Is there other buildings that you have identified that you would like to have control over, whether they're retail or residential, that, without naming names or buildings, are there buildings that you have your eye on? Say, hey, this would be a great addition to either the state or Historic Annapolis's portfolio because of the history of the building. Maybe you're looking at the current 110 Compromise Street. You're looking way in the future, and 100 years from now, it's going to, you're saying this is a perfect example of the architecture in the 2018. But is that something that you do? Would you look around for buildings that would fit in your mix, into your stable of properties?
So I say too often, these old buildings are like horses. They eat every day. And I need to be, I like the idea. I'm a capitalist by training. I like the idea that in a measured way that we could expand our portfolio. The state, I believe, approves of the work that we do. And we get to do part of their mission. That is, have these buildings repurposed or open to the public so that they don't fall into disrepair. And I think there's more buildings in town that might qualify for that. There's a couple that are owned by the state already that the state uses that they may move out or have other plans. And we have those conversations from time to time. So, I think over time, in a measured way, we would be thrilled to tackle some of these antiques.
To make it make sense for them. So what's your background? You said a capitalist by trade or by heart or by...
So I had the good fortune to spend 45 years in the securities business before this. I retired from Wall Street in 2010, and I had the good fortune to be invited to join the board of Historic Annapolis then. And then 2 years later, I was offered the corner office.
Pulled you out of retirement.
It did.
Some of these as I look around here, I don't think that you consider this too much of a job.
It's.
I'm not saying it's not hard work.
You can't call it work. I have the opportunity to work in very special places. I have as I mentioned earlier, I have 50 colleagues that are almost, for the most part, have graduate degrees in related fields, whether it be museum studies or preservation or decorative arts. It's a very stimulating environment to be in. So, no, you're right. And we have a great mission. Yeah. We do lots of good things.
Well, your history from business, where did just a lifelong interest in history that drew you to join the board, or?
So, I guess. I mean,
now, are you from Annapolis originally, or you're a transplant?
So I'll keep this brief. The 3 Clark brothers from Cork, Ireland, landed here in the 1790s and went to work for Charles Carroll of Carrollton into Reagan Manor in Howard County. I'm a 6th generation descended from David Clark. So David Clark's oldest brother, James, lent his name to Clarksville. And in respect out of my own genealogy and decided as we've done all that as a natural lead into this.
Legend. Where were you born? You were born here?
Hagerstown, Maryland.
Okay, so you're a Maryland boy. And up to New York for a career?
Yep.
And then back down here in Annapolis. But now, what drew you from Annapolis as opposed to any other place from coming out of New York? You could have gone anywhere.
Well, when my wife and I got married, we started in this area. And then as I'd get transferred from time to time, we'd always come back here. So we'd move out for a decade and we'd come back for a decade. Then we'd move out for a decade and we always knew this was our final resting place.
And here you are.
And here we are.
In some of the oldest, most beautiful buildings in town, for sure. Well, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I appreciate you explaining the whole City Dock thing. And people really should get involved in that. There will be, as you said, that was the first round. There will be plenty of opportunities for people to voice their opinion, to see how this develops. I'm very encouraged that you are encouraged.
I'm very encouraged.
As opposed to, I mean, it'd be so easy for you to come out and say, okay, the mayor's a jackass, he's wrong and we're right, and now you're butting heads and nobody gets anywhere and it gets put up on the shelf. So I'm very encouraged with that. I love what you're doing with the renovation and the restoration. And
thank you.
I think I'll tout that 4th of July thing, which is still about 9 months away, I guess, now at this point. So an absolutely phenomenal thing. Oh, and I forgot to mention on that one, because you do have the William Peka, an actor.
Yes.
Come down, and he does address the crowd as well. So they do have a signer of the Declaration that comes down and speaks with us there. If you've not been to tour the Peka House, do it. If the Peka House and Gardens. Oh, one last question. Banneker Douglas, not you, right?
They're not us. That's correct. Although I would mention this. We have been in design and will continue to be in design of a permanent exhibit called Annapolis Revealed, which is going to pair 5 of our sites with 5 other museums including Banneker Douglas, who can tell the African-American story much better than we can.
Right.
Annapolis Maritime for maritime.
Right. Hammond Harwood, I guess.
Hammond Harwood for decorative arts. The United States Naval Academy for Navy. And the State House for government. So the 10 locations will all house this exhibit, which is the history of Annapolis in objects. So everything from Roger Staubach's Heisman Trophy to the original acorn that was put on the top of the State House in the 1700s will all be part of this exhibit. So we'll all be tied together, telling different parts of the story.
That's fascinating. And Hammond Harwood, that operates independently, just as Banneker Douglas does as well.
It does.
And obviously you work parallel to a certain degree and along with it.
Yep.
The one house on the corner of Chase Lloyd House, that's a residence?
It is a residence for retired ladies.
Yes. And that is, how do you get into that? Okay, you've got to be a lady and you've got to be retired. I get that.
Well, it's also open to the public a couple of hours every day.
Okay.
So I think at 4 o'clock or so.
And is that more like? And I've never been in that house, but is that like a rooming house type of a?
I think that's a good way of describing it. Yes, retired ladies, that's their home.
Right, and is there any commonality between the ladies that are in there? Are they all Naval Academy?
I don't think there is. I mean, I'm sure there's a process where you apply to be accepted there, and I don't know what that is. But if you haven't been in there, put that on your things to do list. It's extraordinary architecture internally, and it's a great story.
then it is now on my list. Hey, thank you very much. Go to Annapolis.org and check out those webcams at 4 a.m. in the morning. But it's a wealth of information on the properties, on the organization, on their needs. Certainly, you do take donations. I imagine you look for volunteers at certain points as well. My daughter did an internship here this summer. Absolutely loved it. And
thrilled to have her.
If there's people that are looking for internships for their kids, I would highly recommend it here.
Thank you.
A great group of people. And the history of Annapolis, what we see as we walk around the streets today, really scratches it. And as you said, you got to get in the basement of the Bryce house and scratch a little bit deeper and realize what the tombstones are all about. But it's the history is fascinating, and we need to embrace it. We need to understand it. And as you said, that we're not opposed to growing into the 21st and 22nd and 23rd century, but we've got to do it responsibly with an eye to what lays behind us.
Yes, sir.
Robert Clark, CEO of Historic Annapolis, I thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and best of luck. I am going to go to the Chase Lloyd House and check that out, and I'll set my alarm for about 4 a.m. this morning.
Good. Enjoy it. Thanks, John.
And that was Robert Clark from Historic Annapolis.
It was a good talk.
It was. I think this is sort of like the library one. It had the potential to be dry, but it wasn't.
It's one of those things that you hear about these organizations all the time, and you have no idea what they do.
We've done a couple of them that I really liked. I mean, the library certainly is one of them.
That's one of my
Historic
favorites.
Annapolis. When we talked to the Annapolis Dragon Boat Club last week, which was great, and what they're doing for breast cancer and everything else. And I really love getting into the organizations and finding out what they do, because it's digging a little bit deeper, because you can only get so much off of a little clip in a newspaper or a website or something like this. And
do you know the one that's like that? I was at a gala, because that's how I roll, on Saturday for CASA. CASA. CASA, that's a special court-appointed special advocates. Yeah,
and for children, right?
Yeah, they do an incredible job. And that's one of those things, I think people see that organization's name all the time and they don't know what they do. And what they do essentially is that you have children who are in foster care, and they go from foster care home to foster care home. They kind of get bounced around the system, which is just normal. That's what happens. So a CASA, that's a court-appointed special advocate. They're a person who's assigned to that child for years, and they follow that child throughout the system. And they're that kid's constant in the system. So they make sure that, they get their doctor's appointment scheduled. They make sure that, that they understand what the court proceedings are and follow them through school. They meet with teachers, but they are that person who is their constant throughout the system. They do an incredible job. They're just a great organization.
We ought to organize and talk with them.
Yeah, I think we're going to. I actually spoke with the executive director the other night. I think she was swamped with the event, but I'd love to get to talk to them about it.
That would be cool.
Yep.
So by the time people are listening to this, it'll be a done deal.
All right. So it is Tuesday now at It's 11 a.m. and we're in the middle of a monsoon, and we're doing the intro and outro, if we can tear down the fourth wall for this. So I hear John blathering on about the election all the time. So get your papers there, and I am going to hold his feet to the fire. So the polls opened a few hours ago. We have no results back. So John has some predictions. So I want to see how wrong he is.
Well,
go.
First of all, midnight last night, which would have been Monday night, I did release these predictions out as a separate little podcast on the Annapolis Daily News Brief. But for the listeners of the Maryland Crabs, I'll just quickly roll down out my explanation as to why. But
you got 6 minutes.
Okay. On the county question, A is going to be against. County question B is going to be against. County question C will be for.
And no one even reads those. So
okay. State questions will be for, against. Okay, Governor Larry Hogan by a long shot. Comptroller.
Landslide.
They're going to invent a new word for that.
Yes.
It's going to be bigger than a landslide.
Yes, he won by a long shot.
That's right. Comptroller Peter Francho, although I really would have loved to have seen Angie Foucan in there, because I just would have loved to have seen how that worked out.
Yeah, she was very lovely. We had her go back and listen to her podcast. We had her last year.
She's great. Attorney General Brian Frosch, U.S. Senator Ben Cardin, U.S. Congress John Sarbanes.
So no upsets here.
State Senate District 30, Ron George ekes it out over Sarah Elfreth.
I don't know.
State Senate 31, Brian Simonaire. Big Ed Riley in 33. 32 will be Bam Beidel over John Grasso. That's not a big stretch there.
Nope.
District 21, I don't know anything about it, so you guys figure that out on your own. House of Delegates in District 30A. That's right here in the Annapolis area.
All right, go.
Mike Bush will win it because of his name. Bob O'Shea will come in, take that second seat, but I think Bob will get more votes than Speaker Bush.
Okay.
And I think you'll see Chelsea Gill and Alice Kane. They'll come in third and fourth. House of Delegates 30B, that's Seth Howard down in South County. House of Delegates 31A, that'll be Ned Carey. He's up in sort of central northern county. He's decent. 31B, which is the Pasadena, that will be Nick Kipke. Brian Chisholm will probably get it. But Harry Freeman, who's the Democrat running, may slide in there on that. I'm not absolutely sure on that one. District 32, Mark Chang, Patty Ewing, and Republican Sandy Bartlett. So that'll split up that district a little bit. House of Delegates 33, Mike Malone and Sid Saab are in. Tony McConkey is going to be shown the door, and Pam Luby will come in to take Tony McConkey's seat.
Huh.
I think the Teflon Don's reign is over.
I don't agree with you on that, but let's see.
We'll see. Board of Education, District 1, Candace Antwine and David Starr. Take your pick.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Their claim to fame for both of them is that they have kids.
Let's get to the hot race. Register of wills.
Haven't gotten there yet. District 4 for the school board. Julie Hummer will be over Melissa Ellis. District 5, it'll be Dana Schalheim over Terry Gilliland. Terry is a political sort of an operative kind of a guy. District 7 for the school board, it'll be Letitia Hicks over Michelle Corkadell because Michelle Corkadell will be seen as tied too closely to County Executive Steve Shue. She works for him as a constituent services person.
That's a great name, though. Corkadell.
I know.
It's like a children's book character. This is Corkadell.
All been waiting for it. Orphans Court judges.
Yes.
That's not going to change. Nancy Phelps, Maureen Carr York, and Alan Raspowski.
What do they do?
I don't know. They take care of all the orphans.
Oh, very Dickinson. Dickinsonian.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those races that nobody really seems to know what they do. I've been
embarrassed to ask for like 25 years.
As will the Register of Wills.
Yeah, well, I get that. Yeah. Here's I will. Okay, let me put this in the drawer.
That won't change either. That'll be Lauren Parker. She'll keep that. Clerk of the Courts will change because the guy that is the Clerk of the Court, Bob Duckworth, is resigning. So he's
been doing this since Christ was in kindergarten. Like when we moved here 20 years ago, Duckworth was doing this.
Absolutely. His deputy clerk of the court is Doug Arnold. He's been there for like 20 some odd years. He'll handily win that because running the courthouse is really kind of a complex kind of a deal. State's attorney, I think Wes Adams is going to take it off of Ann Colt-Litis. I think Ann Colt-Litis, but I think she came across too negative and she came across as a whiny, spoiled loser, and I don't think that's going to resonate.
Oh, my God. All right, I just like right now to separate myself from John's opinion on this.
Sheriff Jim Fredericks.
Let's just make that a rolling thing.
He's going to do that. Take care of that. Looking into the county council in District 7, which is Edgewater area. James Kitchen will take that, I think, because the Crofton people are pissed off about development and traffic up there.
They're always pissed.
And while they did like Jerry Walker, Jessica Hare is the wife of the GOP chair for the state of Maryland. And I think that's going to be a little bit too close. James Kitchen.
I met her.
Did you?
At the CASA thing. I met her in Kirk.
Dirk.
Yep. Dirk. Sorry.
Dirk.
Sorry, Dirk.
So I think James Kitchen is going to get that. District 5, which is the Annapolis area, I think that Lisa Rodvian is going to take care of that. She slightly defeated Scott McMullen in the primary by about 160 votes or something like that.
It was a good job, Scotty.
Her opponent, Mike Crispin, has just been, he's like, might as well be Casper the Ghost. He hasn't been out doing anything, so I think he's a reluctant candidate.
Not even friendly? Just Casper the Ghost? Not even a friendly ghost?
No. District 5, Amanda Fiedler will take that one. She's the one that bounced out Michael Peruka in the primary.
Oh, yeah.
And that is you got to remember that's a real conservative district because they elected Peruka in the first place. So that's probably not going to go to a Democrat, but both of the people in that race are very qualified for it. Andrew Prusky in District 4 will take it back. He's the only incumbent that's running again on the council. District 3, which is again up in the Pasadena, I think you're going to see Nathan Volke, who's a Republican, will eke out a very slim win against Deb Ritchie, a former school board member. District 2, which is John Grasso, I think that's going to flip. They've got Allison Picard, who is a Democrat. She's a former school board member.
Make it so.
She's running against Tom Gardner, who is a sort of a political insider there. District 1, which was a surprise when they booted out Pete Smith in the primary. Sarah Lacey won that. That tells me that district really wants wholehearted change. And I think Sarah Lacey will probably come by on a slim margin on that. County Executive, Steve Shue.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that the race is a lot closer than Steve Shue ever thought it would be, or
it's closer
probably ever will admit that he thought it would be.
It's closer than I thought it would be.
And I think we're going to find the numbers are going to be very a lot closer than they are. I don't think Stuart Pittman's going to have the money to do it, or not the money, but the votes to do it. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I do think Pittman will be around. I think he will be a thorn in the side of Steve Shue. I think you might see him run for county council, possibly delegate, or maybe even county executive again in 4 years.
Huh.
So I don't think...
He broke some ground here. He got the name recognition now.
I think he got some serious endorsements. You got the police, you got the teachers, you had Laura Newman, the old county executive, come back and stump for him.
Yeah.
Again, that Laura Newman thing came out a little bit as sort of a, bitter apples, because she lost
sour apples.
Sour grapes.
God, we're awful with this today.
God, we're off with the fruit analogies.
Went by a long shot.
Yeah.
Well, so those are all your predictions. And look, listen to people. They're accurate because I picked up his packet of papers that he was just 6
pages.
Look at that. You have an analysis on here on each race and everything. So he just rattled them through, but he had analysis on each one of these.
If you want to see my reasoning behind my picks, actually you can, it'll be yesterday's news at that point, but you can go to Tuesday's podcast. You'll see a bonus episode for election picks for 2018. You can listen to it. It's about an 18-minute long.
I had Annapolis Daily Briefing
explanation, and you can do that. But if you want to get in touch with us at the Maryland Crabs at any given time, Tim's home number is area code 4.
Yeah, I wouldn't even care.
Have somebody to talk to.
Call me 2 a.m. Good. Hey.
Our email address is info@themarylandcrabs.com. You can tweet at us, which is MD Crabs Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Group and a page.
Yep. And we do have a text back line and a voicemail line and all that kind of stuff.
Do we?
I forget what the number is.
Yeah, that's news to me.
It's like 443-266 something or other.
Okay. Yeah, so call us on that, folks.
Next week, we are going to be talking with Gary, who lives in the basement at St. John's. And I'll leave that at that.
That sounds creepy.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.